Sharon Skolnick-Bagnoli, and Bruce and I together produce Marinations, a show on CMCM.
I'm Bruce Bagnoli. Today we have Ford Greene and Larry Bragman with us. They've just returned from a trip to North Dakota to Standing Rock. So I'd like to ask you guys first, what's going on over there? What's going on in Standing Rock right now just before you left? And when was that?
We left on Wednesday, and there was a lot of wind and a lot of snow, and people were hunkering down in the face of it. That's what was going on ostensibly, and what was going on a deeper level was an ongoing unifying of the humanity of the people that were there in terms of getting their own personal hang-ups out of the way, I would say, to use the language of the 60s. The language of Standing Rock was getting your own trauma out of the way and not having your own traumatic history get in the way of your ability to be open to and bond with other people. So I think the wind and the cold contributed to that.
And I would say, on a sort of a broader level, the word I would use is it's a crucible. It is the meeting or the conflict of cultural preservation with just the indomitable force of late stage capitalism and the just undaunted power of the oil industry, which is now really leading our country into this self-destructive cycle with climate change and environmental plunder, which this pipeline really represents in a very graphic way. And you see that. We were camped, Ford and I camped along the banks of the Cannonball River, which is sort of a very circuitous little tributary of the Missouri River. And across a little wetland from us, you could see the surveillance lights of pipeline construction and security sort of looming ominously over.
Well, they were strung across the top of hillsides, so they were high up. They were probably strung out over, I would say, a mile and a half or maybe 2 miles worth of geographic territory. With and they were like prison lights. They were Gaza-like lights that were directed at us, and I suppose the correlative purpose was to protect the pipeline from monkey wrenching, but. It was really like Larry says, it was a crucible, and it was a confrontation between the forces of life, the forces of survival, the forces demanding the kind of change that's sufficiently responsive to the conditions economically, ecologically, and spiritually that are needed if human beings are going to be able to bridge the gap that's being presented by economic exploitation and climate change.
How big was the camp physically?
I would say it's probably 30, 40 acres.
It was big.
It's big.
It was huge. Not as big as Burning Man, which it's been compared to, and it's no justification to that comparison in my opinion.
Well, you've been to both. What's the difference?
Well, the difference is, one, the music's much better at Ocheti Shikoyan. I hate the music of Burning Man. I can't stand electro-punk.
I wasn't sure which way you were going to go on that.
And the people were not drug-addled, alcohol-fueled, frenzied like they are at Burning Man. The people were more focused, were more open. The sense of palpable spiritual guidance was present at Standing Rock, where at Burning Man, people talk like that, but in my experience, there's really not much of it there.
And there's a big effort by the tribal elders to kind of herd the people into the big tent of the spirits and the fire, and to not have people sort of acting out their own personal traumas, which we were reminded everybody that came to Standing Rock probably had some traumatic or dysfunctional personal story to kind of justify why they were there. But they made it very clear that we were their guests. We weren't invited there to live out our personal problems or to act out on them.
Or fantasies.
Or fantasies. And you can tell them the story about the one camper that came with some pretty delusional desires. But also for the tribe itself, it's a time of cultural and sovereign recovery for them. And for them to emerge out of the shadows of really centuries of repression with the dignity and humanity that they did was pretty amazing to experience.
And
a little
it
bit
felt
surprising.
good.
It felt good.
It felt great. I mean, it felt really good on a human, on the affirmation of humanity level there. There was intelligence, there was sensitivity, there was pride, there's dignity and coherence.
So it sounds like it was really clear. This was a Native American-led protest.
Yes.
And anyone who was there needed to abide by their rules.
Yes.
So unlike the kind of reception that you would get at Burning Man, which I'm not saying one way or the other is better or worse, but it's just different. It sounds like here there was some kind of a real, here's the ground rules kind of a thing.
There was. I mean, it's not like there were people going around telling you what to do, but there was a meeting of elders every day at 1 in a very large dome that was probably 70, 80 feet across.
Wow.
And 40 feet in height, with a big double-barreled stove in the middle of it. And a circle where the elders sat and basically held court and talked about what their perspective was at on that day and how they wanted to see the camp go. And apparently, because there had been a high influx of people into the camp, a lot of whom were not sensitive to looking toward the elders and respecting what they had landed in the midst of, and were deciding what their own direct actions were going to be, and deciding what they were going to do, and not really paying attention. And so there was explicit reference to that, and saying is no good. And a couple examples are, this one Indian guy got up full, he was in an Oglala Sioux, full headdress, feather headdress, and he said that he had heard about how there was a bus of people being moved, and that there was a native person that told all the white people to get out of the bus. And the Indian guy said that he flat out called it racist, condemned it, said that's no good, that's not what we're about. Another example was how a kid who came there, a white kid had come there with the idea that he was going to, on the front line, immolate himself with gasoline a la Buddhist monk in the Vietnam era. And it was, no, that's not what we're about. What we're about is prayer and being open to being led by the spirits who have gone before us to address the threat not only to our existence, but to the existence of the entire planet. And that was one of the things that was palpable and uncanny there, was this sense of demarcation of what I would call, in my language, of forces of light and forces of darkness. And so in the camp and in the tribe, it was open, it was warm, it was caring, it was compassionate, and people paid attention.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And how were you guys received?
We were received like everybody. There was no special reception for us. Ford and I had contacted the Water Protector Legal Collective, which is the criminal defense group that's handling some of the local criminal cases that have been filed against demonstrators. So that was sort of our entree to the camp. And they have a real well-organized legal tent on what they call Facebook. There's very little internet connection there, as you might imagine. It's a pretty remote area.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of our entree. And then, within the next day or so, we sort of made our way to the tribal elders' tent. And, I think pretty quickly figured out in the limited amount of time we had, we were better off trying to focus maybe on some of the bigger background issues rather than running to misdemeanor court. And that's kind of what led us to the work that was described in that IJ article about really looking at the legal framework, the property rights framework that seems to have been sort of shoved under the rug here and abused, which are the property rights of the tribe over the land in which the pipeline is attempting to route itself.
Is this treaty rights?
It's clearer than treaty rights.
Oh, good.
It is an act of Congress in 1958, and just real quickly, so where the pipeline is intended to go, it's called Lake Oahe.
The remaining section.
The remaining, yeah. So hundreds of miles of pipeline have already been laid from the Bakken oil field in northwest Dakota down to this area.
Strategically putting a lot of pressure on the
Exactly,
Army Corps of Engineers.
on the keystone, so to speak, final link of this multi-billion-dollar project. Lake Oahe is a drinking water reservoir that was created along the banks of the Missouri River in 1948. And it was built by the Army Corps, probably under the Bureau of Reclamation's jurisdiction. They flooded 56,000 acres of the Standing Rock Reservation's most prime ranch land along the Missouri River and didn't compensate the tribe. In 1958, after a decade of pressure and lobbying by the tribe, Congress passed the law 85-915 that compensated the tribe. And in that legislation, an act of Congress, it specifically and unambiguously reserved all mineral rights whatsoever under the lake to the tribe, and also very clearly spelled out that the Army Corps' jurisdiction was in the operation of the reservoir.
And they could take actions in connection with that to make sure that the operation of the reservoir occurred as needed. So there's specific authorization later in 1992 that the Army Corps could engage in brush clearing and other kinds of activities that would make the drinking water go right, so to speak. It was really Larry. See, Larry was brilliant. We were walking around.
You guys are both lawyers, right?
Yeah, we're both lawyers, and we've come up pretty much together. I think he's got a little lower bar number than I do, but we've come up together,
Same year, I think.
and we've come up together in Marin, and have legally gone on, done our own thing on parallel tracks, and politically too, and they have been friends over the years. And so that was part of the human fun part of this trip. But we were reconnoitering the limits of the camp when Larry, and talking about what we thought was legally the big picture of what was going on, and Larry started talking about sub-adjacent rights, and querying whether or not in the flooding of the land to make Lake Oahe, the land underneath the surface had been transferred. And so right after that, we went to one of these tribal elder meetings where there was a woman who had grown up on the Standing Rock Reservation, had been on the tribal council, named Phyllis Young, who was very well spoken, presented really well, very clear and easy to understand, well educated. And we then introduced ourselves to her afterwards and told her who we were and what we were about a little bit. And she invited us to join in kind of a legal strategy room in a nearby local casino that night. And so we went up there, and Larry right away commandeered a laptop and started doing independent research. And Phyllis passed me a copy of 85-915, Public Law 85-915, and I started reading the text of it. And sure enough, right there as an act of Congress was exactly what Larry had been talking about. And
So the tribe has those rights.
it would appear that way.
It's explicit. It's much
It's
clearer.
unambiguous.
It's much clearer than the treaty. The treaties in effect for
Right.
the Dakota and Lakota people are 150 years old. This was a modern piece of legislation.
Excellent.
And it was reaffirmed in 1992.
Excellent.
and then referred to again in a stipulated settlement in federal court in Washington, D.C.
2012.
In 2012.
So
So it's current.
So there's no excuse for the Army Corps not knowing that this agreement existed or being capable of reading it. They may not have read it.
No,
but-
the Army Corps retains jurisdiction to supervise, construction activity on the reservoir to make sure it doesn't impede the
course.
operation of the
Yes,
reservoir.
of course.
But
So does that
one
include
thing I learned.
protections? Because when I worked on protections with PG&E at one point for pipelines, there's all kinds of protections you can put, like double sleeving them, having pigs go through
Yeah.
there to inspect them. You can have valves on either side, automatic sensors, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
They could require that. I don't know if they
Yeah,
are.
they can do all that. They can do all that. But one thing they can't do is give permission to disturb the minerals that lay under the lake bed.
Oh,
so what I was going to say is one of the little tidbits I learned at MMWD is the concept of surface water collection versus aquifer. And it's very clear, Oahe is a surface water impoundment. So they get the lake bed, but the tribe managed to reserve the mineral rights and oil and gas rights. And in doing further research since I got home, there's another adjacent reservoir and maps of oil and gas deposits. And so this is a big thing in North Dakota. North Dakota is sitting on a very large supply of valuable minerals.
Yes.
So this,
And this is owned by the tribe at this point.
those rights are retained by the Standing Rock tribe.
So
explicitly.
So this is something that's being taken from them. It's a taking, in a sense, without any kind of due process at all.
It is a
a trespass.
It is a trespass. It's a usurpation. It's complete disregard of their property rights.
Great. So
and then Larry also, he showed up with a resolution from his own water protector board supporting the Standing Rock people, and
Right.
So that was.
Yeah,
that was something that was great.
That gave me a little bit of an entree with Phyllis, and that's I was kind of following her around, like tapping her on the shoulder with this piece of paper, and she they have a lot on their plate. They've got
they
I
do.
think something like 2,000 veterans for peace
Coming
are
in this weekend.
Yes.
So
I just hope it doesn't get lost, because this kind of a legal basis can make all the
It's not
all
going
the subsequent actions. If it was illegal to begin with, isn't that a pretty good basis for defense?
We hope so, and I think at the end of the day, what I hope we can do is at least give the tribe the encouragement and the confidence to pursue their rights.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very big
big
piece of the picture, because the other legal challenges which have been brought under the Historic Preservation Act have been sort of pushed aside, and there's been flagrant violations
Yeah.
of that, and just complete disregard of the cultural sanctity.
Well, for example,
of this area.
They filed in court a document detailing the location of sacred sites, and the next morning, Transfer Energy Partners bulldozers were out there trashing those sites. And so, I mean, part of again, going back to the spiritual context, I guess what I would call the spiritual context of what's happening there, is this juxtaposition of betrayal on one side and integrity on the other. And the integrity that the Native peoples are living and manifesting is predicated on nonviolence. And after being there for a couple of days, the sense of that I understood, because there's no other way they could be successful. I mean, practically speaking, they don't have the firepower to fight back.
Oh, who does?
And nobody does. Nobody does. So it's what Larry was talking about, a crucible of moral and spiritual meaning and gravitas on one side, and then the suppression of accurate media information, the intimidation of reporters, the use of unbelievable violence in terms of water cannons and sub-freezing
Have we
temperatures.
seen anything like this since the Pettus Bridge? Have we seen anything like this
Not-
in civil
not in-
rights?
not in the
Not
United
in
States.
civil rights, and
Not
that's
in
what
the
it
United States?
reminds you of
not-
Selma. in
Not in the
Birmingham.
United States. I mean, it's the type of militarization that the United States has been exporting for decades to other indigenous
But it's here.
areas. But now
Yeah.
the chickens have come home to roost.
So I understand that the tribes really have a different time frame in looking at things also. They talk about 7 generations.
That's true.
And they're looking that way. So how many generations did they have there?
Oh, boy, I never even thought about that. I probably at least 4 or 5.
Because you saw
Because
kids
they're
there,
little
is that
kids,
right?
they're medium kids, they're bigger kids.
I mean, there's some pretty amazing connections with some pretty historic people.
Yeah.
I mean, Phyllis is, I believe, is the sibling of Russell Means, and but some of the other elders were talking, and I've read about it. Red Cloud was one of the signatories to the Fort Laramie Treaty. His son was still alive into the 70s.
Wow.
So you've got people in this community. There's this, what I'll call institutional memory, tribal memory,
Yes.
group memory.
Yes.
That's
Cultural memory.
cultural memory that, in spite of all the efforts to wipe it out, it's been resilient enough to where there's just been a thread of it that's survived. And you can, to me, part of what this is about their recovery, if not maybe a renaissance of their culture and their community. So it's a pretty amazing and impressive thing to watch.
One question I have is that the Lakota people were kind of like the original nomads in a way. I mean, they didn't sit anywhere and hold territory. They ranged over a wide area. Mm-hmm. This action is very reminiscent of World War I, where everybody sits and shoots at each other from 2 different sides, except one side doesn't have any guns and isn't shooting. But do you see any parallels or movement there in that?
I don't have enough knowledge of history to be intelligent about that.
Okay. That's
Larry probably does, though.
Well, I just see the cycles also. There was a Wounded Knee thing that happened, and it didn't get much media attention until Sasheen Littlefeather stood up at the Oscars and refused Marlon Brando's Oscar, and kind of all of a sudden brought that light on it. But here you are in a situation where you have the massacres in the 1870s and the 1890s, and then you've got a long period of time with nobody paying any attention, and then suddenly you've got the Wounded Knee business, and then after that there's kind of a period of not
Quiescence.
attention.
Yeah.
But now you've got these tribes, 200 tribes coming together, but you've got a different social situation, because the social media we found in this election is more like a echo chamber. everybody talking to each other, but not really talking outside it. So the question is that something that's different and puts people at a different risk?
Does the
I think-
existence of social media?
Well, social media is almost like an echo chamber. So we're trying to
Yeah.
get the word out about what's really going on and reach people. But the question is
Are you
social
just talking to
media
your
ever?
friends?
Is it just are you just talking to your friends? Are they just doing this? Are they? Or
I,
are they
you
getting
know,
outside?
I mean, I think what you're trying to do is seed the media with, seeds of truth.
Okay.
Because it has become so contaminated with untruth and unfact. It's like Michael Moore said, we live in fictional times. Those were very prescient words, because now it's a deliberate strategy. It's not sort of
Right.
an inadvertent byproduct.
no,
No.
it's
This smoke-
institutionalized propaganda.
Yeah, it's it is.
it is.
So, is social media the answer? No, but it's a tool.
It seems to be.
And is Standing Rock the answer? No, but it's a model for them. It's a model for that community, and maybe is a model partially for us.
Well, you know what else is that if there wasn't social media, there would be no information whatsoever.
Right.
Because the corporate media wasn't paying attention at all, and
That's
wasn't
right.
covering it at all. And it was only really through social media that citizen reporters were reporting. And after a while, and then thank goodness for Amy Goodman over the Labor Day
Yeah,
weekend,
that's right.
because she really broke the lid off it with those images of the dogs going after the people, and with the bloody snouts.
That's right.
And
That's
the
right.
pepper spraying, and then subsequently, I mean, there was this one kind of beachhead that we went and visited, which was the location where there are the news reports of people in the water confronting law enforcement and getting pepper sprayed like crazy. Well, and so it's just a very small stretch of river. I mean, it's like 25 feet across. And now on the law enforcement side of the river, there's concertina wire, coils and coils of razor wire. It's laid out. So it's an occupation.
Well, thank you very much. I think what I wanted to do is find out what you guys are going to do next, and what other people can do to engage in this conversation and get in here. Because, like I said, with the social media, it's helped with organizing. It's also been very transparent to the other side to watch and see what's going on. In balance, it seems to have helped more in this particular case than it didn't. But the question is, what's the next step? We were threats to have the state use force to remove people. There's veterans who are going to stand there and get in their way. I mean, this doesn't look to me like it's heading in a good direction.
I think it will end peacefully, if not well, because my belief is, I think the social media piece is a critical component, not only for this fight, but for all the resistance going forward, because we need to change perception, and we need to get the message out that everybody needs to do whatever they can do. And to the extent that social media provides a platform, a tool, a means of communication to do that, it's definitely an asset that we can use, and it's a horizontal asset. It's not this top-down kind of old-fashioned media. I mean, it's be the media, and that has some dangers. What I was talking about, there's seeds of truth, there's seeds of falsehood, but we can change perception just with the truth.
That's right.
And that's what it's about. And I think it's going to take a many-faceted movement of people to change perception. And as Ford and I both know, it's the change in perception caused by social movements that really move the law.
It's true.
Yeah, that's
It's
true. And speaking of that, I mean, one immediate concrete thing that people can do is to call the White House and to urge Obama to step in, because you referenced a few minutes ago the comparison between what's going on in Standing Rock and what went on in the late 50s and early 60s in the South with attack dogs going after demonstrators and fire hoses going after demonstrators. This is a repeat.
They were killing demonstrators too then.
Well, you know, that woman that got her arm blown off,
She could have died.
got pretty close to that. And the
Cardiac arrest.
The reports of mercenaries there shooting people with rubber bullets and laughing. So that's sadism that's being protected by law enforcement. And so that's exactly what would be appropriate for federal intervention. And it's not that Barack Obama is all of a sudden going to get a whole big dose of courage, but he might, and you never know.
I think this could be a defining moment.
I do too.
Oh, it'd be great.
And I think if Obama wants to protect his legacy, he can't rest on his laurels, because
That's my
the
point.
next administration is intent on dismantling his legacy.
Right.
So unless the Democrats stand up for their core constituencies of the whole Democratic coalition,
Just the democratic process. Hello.
and democracy,
Just democracy.
and democracy.
How about that?
The rudiments.
How about proportionate use of force instead of just, giving one side carte blanche?
Well, I don't think you concede that authority.
Right.
And I think it's a huge tactical mistake to do that in the name of a peaceful transition of power.
It's really appeasement.
It is appeasement, and we are in for the political battle of our lives.
That's right.
For this generation.
That's right.
And for our life.
That's right.
And the reason I'm in here right now is that I have been, over the years, supportive of AIM and the Indian world insofar as I can be, and I have a lot of feeling about it. And I'm wondering several things. As we're taping this, it is Friday, the 2nd of December. I have heard that there's some confrontation anticipated for Monday, the 5th of December, when the governor of North Dakota has said that there's an eviction or something like that, a closing, an eviction. And I'm wondering, since you have found this, I don't know if it's a loophole or it's a reality, that they actually, the tribe actually has jurisdiction over the land under the water of the lake. Can that be presented to stop this? Can something happen between now and Monday so that the people on the side of the brutal police stop what they're doing?
There was an emergency restraining order that was presented in federal district court by the National Lawyers Guild this week that was declined on a technicality because apparently the state of North, it was an emergency application. Judge said, I'm not going to rule on this until you serve the state of North Dakota. There was an emergency temporary restraining order presented to the United States District Court in Washington, D.C. to stop the project because of its desecration of historic artifacts and historic lands. That was denied. There was, after the denial of that, there was a second emergency application that was denied. There was a third application for a restraining order to restrain the project while they appeal. And I believe that may have been declined too. The property rights issue that Ford and I have been working on, as far as I know, has not been litigated. And one of the things we were trying to do by being there and doing what we could do in the time we had there, and also we've continued to work on it since we've been back, is to present a cogent and coherent outline to the tribe so they have the confidence to move forward legally, and I'll pass it to you.
Thank you.
I don't really know what I can add to that, but between now and Monday, no. I mean, practically, even if it wasn't something as huge as this, courts aren't open, and and there are rules about providing notice, and you've got to give the other side notice, you've got to serve the other side, and so there isn't. But I don't think there's going to be a confrontation on the 5th. It was the governor was setting that up by his evacuation order and his order prohibiting his blockade order.
Yeah.
But since then, and since 2000, veterans are all of a sudden coming into Standing Rock, and they're intending to camp. They're not just visiting; they're coming in. I think the ante is upped, and from what I've heard is the government side is backing off, and they're backpedaling. So I don't think so. It just looks like it's like Amy Goodman being prosecuted. She was charged with felony incitement to riot or something, and they threw the gauntlet down. She took it up and said, "Okay, let's go." And they backed off. So I think there's a lot of bluffing going on by the part of the government.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. On the other hand, Energy Transfer Partners is bound and determined. There's absolutely no concession or negotiation on their part. I think they're probably biding their time until the next administration comes in, which we know the president-elect has a monetary interest in the outcome of this project.
Yeah, I've heard that. I also heard that there's some kind of deadline at the beginning of January that if this project is not finished by then, a lot of the people that are funding it, including the ones that are going to run the oil, the fracked oil through, are going to back away from the project. So there's some kind of deadline that the companies are trying to meet, and if they don't meet it, maybe that'll
I think it's tied to the price of the oil, is that the oil price expires then, and the expiration of a favorable price may have an adverse economic impact. But I haven't seen enough on it to have any real confidence in what's going on.
And I don't think the pipeline.
I don't think it's going to matter.
It's not going to go away.
No.
I mean, the question is, how is it going to end? Maybe it has to end north of Standing Rock. Maybe it's got to go around Standing Rock. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a epical economic battle and boom in the state of North Dakota. So the rights of the tribe are historic and vital, but to the people with monetary interests in the Bakken field, I mean, this is like a Texas type asset for the people for some of the people in North Dakota. So, there's a lot of oil coming out of North Dakota now without this pipeline. So that's one thing I'm really interested in. How's it getting out? Maybe it's on Warren Buffett's trains, who is a big Democratic contributor. So there is corruption and influence. It's bipartisan, and
that raises another issue, which is the lack of objection and criticism by Democrats. And the Democratic side, with the exception of Jared Huffman and a few others, is silent. I mean, Bernie hasn't been silent, but all the other ones have been silent. And the reason is because apparently Sunoco is poised to purchase Energy Transfer Partnership, and Sunoco gives big dollars to Democratic politicians. So the corruption of money relating to the corruption of the political process, relating to the corruption of the earth, is all happening.
And the intellectual corruption that accompanies it. I mean, this is a decision-making process, and the decision should be based on facts, not on influence. And if you read the environmental reports, which are, I'm sure there are lengthy environmental reports. The tribe commissioned a very blunt, short environmental report done by an expert that usually works for the Army Corps of Engineers. And in 12 pages, it just tears the project apart. Robert F. Kennedy critiqued it, and he noted in his critique, this is a 1,700-mile pipeline. A lot of it was segmented. So there are exceptions to the environmental assessment requirements under federal regulation.
When things are segmented, it's little by little by
little bits,
and that's
piece
what
by
they
piece.
use.
Piece by piece.
I heard that
this
that's
is
how
a
they.
1,700-mile project that used that exemption. I mean, it's a fiction. It is a legal fiction that has circumvented the intent of the law. And where does the oil go at the end of the game? It's going to get shipped to Illinois, shipped down the Mississippi River to the ports in New Orleans and Texas,
Shipped
and
to China.
probably exported.
Yeah.
Because guess what?
We don't need it.
We don't need it. Oil production in the United States has gone up 90% since 2008. And the oil companies lobbied Congress to remove the ban on the export of crude oil out of the United States. Distilled products have been allowed to be exported for decades, not crude oil. The United States, this is an extractive process from native lands
Right.
and from public lands that is being foisted, on the people and on the public. And
There's ultimately no benefit to us. The benefit will accrue to the corporate coffers, but to the people in this country are just going to end up, holding a corrosive bag that'll contaminate and hurt them.
yeah, well, we will. They will take the profits. We will pay the price. The public trust has been completely lost in this.
Well, it's an endless cowboy and Indian movie that has got to end. People binge on it. They get off on it somehow. But I think that one of the problems with this country, my belief is that one of the problems why this country is a sick country is it's never dealt with the genocide. It's never apologized. It's never compensated. It's never acknowledged. It's never respected those people. I have a question. I know Dennis Banks is there, and he's an old friend and teacher of mine. I used to go up to DQ University. He taught Indian law up there. And I wondered if you ran into him, and if so, did you give him some of your research? Does he know about it?
We didn't meet him. Our contact was Phyllis Young, who I think is Russell Means' sister. But Phyllis is her own leader. She's on the Treaty Council, which is a multi-tribal group that has to make the decision whether to pursue these legal rights. So she was really our contact and sort of our guiding star while we were there.
And we didn't have a printer, but I printed as legibly as I could the outline of what our argument.
You hand printed it?
With
Yeah.
my.
He's got pretty good handwriting.
When I want to, and so with the statutory references and embedded, part of the trick I think of being an effective lawyer is translating the law into plain English, so that and it should be, and it's totally capable of doing that, and really all technical stuff needs to be translated into plain English. So. It was in plain English, and Phyllis has it. It's just I know her hands are full, and she's got 2,000 veterans coming in this weekend, and it's blizzardy and snowy, and there's a lot going on, a lot to manage.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that in your ways you can support what they're doing, and I want to thank you both, and also I want to thank Sasheen Littlefeather for suggesting that we interview you both.
Oh,
and
good. It's our pleasure and our honor. I mean, really, it's we get a lot out of it. I know Ford and I both got a lot out of it, just being there and sort of being able just to be part of that. And there's so many other people that have been there for so long.
It's not just that. It's being able to do something meaningful now.
Yes.
I mean, we're at the cusp of a period that's going to be as challenging and difficult, and probably more so, of anything that's occurred in the last 50 to 100 years. And there's lots of room for everybody to be effective. I was listening to this radio show, and in the Native American culture, there's no divergence between spirituality and politics. They're the same thing, as well they should be. Mm-hmm. And so now the opportunity exists, and the necessity requires all of us, to the best of our ability, to integrate our own love with our political action, to preserve what we can of a world that we've grievously hurt, and to stop more destruction.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's critical, and everybody's got a part, everybody's got a piece, and everybody's got an opportunity. And I mean, I think that's part of what motivated me to go there. It's like, got to do something, got to see what's going on. We have to do something.
Are you each willing to have your contact information at the end of our show?
Oh, yes.
Good. Okay, because people watching might want to.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Well,
it's kind of like Gil Scott-Heron said. He said nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something.
But he also said the revolution will not be televised.
And it's not. That's true.
No, it's online.
That's true.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Water.
Cheers.
Water's life.
Water's life.
Here's water. Here's to our water.